what is it that is causing people to be uninterested in history, in what people have done before us, what has worked, what hasn't worked? What is it that is causing people to be uninterested in having an opinion?
Hello everyone. Today's talk is going to be about seeking more understanding.
I think just a general curiosity for knowledge and the lack of it
Yeah,
that we see in society in general, but not at all relating to a lack of knowledge in terms of academia or anything like that. More a wanting to attempt to understand a spiritual kind of knowledge.
yeah,
A wanting to understand a knowledge that will cause controversy within the humanitarian liberal society. And because of that, it seems like the easiest thing in order to escape controversy is to remain ignorant.
yeah,
So if you decide to acquire, or you decide to want to desire certain types of knowledge and want to gain understanding regarding certain subjects, that would lead automatically to society ostracizing you, or your friend groups wanting to have nothing to do with you.
yeah. And I know in the Old Testament, God actually says, "My people perish for the lack of knowledge." And then we start going off after other faiths and other things to actually make ourselves look more wise. But you're getting further and further away from God. And yeah, it's actually very sad. Yeah, I'm just going to share a past acquaintanceship that I had. And this lady called herself a Christian, but she was reading Hindi books and Muslim books and all other kinds of faiths. And what I find fascinating about those kind of people is because they don't ever tell you how things actually started. And she did mention one day that she had a very bad cold, and she was trying to replicate somebody else's healing from a cold, and things didn't quite work out. And I think that was the whole thing. You know, like, I mean, I'm not healed, so I'm going to go that way now. You know.
And I think I know people who sort of would claim to be Christian and do all the right things in terms of ticking boxes, of religious duty and that which a Christian should fulfill, i.e., going to church, being quote unquote kind and compassionate. But all these things need to be balanced with, is it true? It's all fine and well to have these things that you do, the outward trappings of Christianity. But as we know, God looks at the heart. So if you are doing all these Christian activities, but your heart isn't in it, because you're not really concerned, or your mind isn't, and your passion isn't in the thing that you're doing it as an obligation, and you're not really interested in it, then there should be a question as to why are you not interested in it?
Yeah.
And if you are going to claim to be Christian, it should be something that you want to do. First of all, it's, God is not a God who forces himself upon anybody. A lot of people will say, yes, amen to that. But then why is it that there's so many people in the church that still, they understand that in terms of mentally, but they don't understand it in terms of practically, because they still do these things, these activities, not really wanting to. And then the other side is also, there's those that are in the world that are just uninterested in anything. Because there's this idea that ignorance is the safest course of action.
It's bliss, yeah.
Ignorance is the thing that is going to keep me in good stead regarding society. If I choose to sit on the fence with as many topics, as many subjects as I can, then that is going to make me safe in society's eyes.
Yeah, and I'm not going to dare say no to others. I don't quite go along with that. Well, choose a side. Even if you are quiet, you're actually choosing a side.
And I think it's because people have got this idea that the more you learn, and again, it's specific learning I'm talking about. It's specific learning, not necessarily learning biblical truths, but let's take the example of history would be a good one. I think the more that people are ignorant about history, the more they fit into the progressive narrative, because the progressive narrative was all about getting rid of history for the sake of making progress about what can be in the future. So get away with learning history, because learning history is a terrible thing. That is obviously their narrative, because we're attempting to do something that's never been done before. If you just had to do somewhat of a deep dive, not even a shallow dive into history, you will see that there's been many dictators that have said that kind of thing in the past, always having this mindset of we're doing a new thing.
And is it really new? Do you honestly think, out of all the people, that you are the only one who has actually thought of this?
And your conviction, you being convicted, can only come from you being knowledgeable. If
Yeah.
you choose to remain ignorant, not only will you be open to deception and more gullible and more open to be swayed, but you'll also just be a fence sitter, never choosing to make a stand, and in your brain you will come to the conclusion that by sitting on the fence is possibly the safest thing.
Yeah, and also if you have actually grown up in a home where your parents didn't go to church, or they went to church every once in a while, and they actually taught you that it really means nothing, or we just go there because we just go there. Are you going to follow them, or are you going to man up or challenge
Mm.
your anti mindset?
Mm. And it's not at all attempting to be like certain pastors and certain churchgoers who are on the other side of the equation, where it's this mentality of pull your bootstraps up, try harder. I've been through that. That's also detrimental. But it's more asking the question, what is it that is causing people to be uninterested in, leave the Bible aside, what is it that is causing people to be uninterested in history, in what people have done before us, what has worked, what hasn't worked? What is it that is causing people to be uninterested in having an opinion and wanting to speak their mind and things of this nature? What is the cause of people wanting to be indifferent?
I think maybe a large part is fear that if they do say what they really think, their friends and family is going to, turn against them. But I think we become so lazy, and we've got no need to really make a stand.
Mm.
We don't actually see it.
Mm.
We don't think about the larger picture. It's like, I'm fine. You can say whatever you want to say, but it's all about me. Whether I have got food and clothing and a job, I'm fine.
And it's
actually selfishness.
And it's also got to do with, people will believe, what I've noticed, people are going to believe talking points and narratives that they've heard from quote unquote reputable sources and sources that they trust. So they take that as a truth for themselves, as opposed to doing your own research and finding out that thing might sound good, but is that thing true? That thing that this person, the source that I respect or admire, they're saying something that sounds good on paper and it fits my shallow intellect, but beyond that, do I have any conviction about the subject? Is it something that I truly hold to? Is it something I truly agree with? Or is it something that I've chosen to adopt because it seems like the populace has adopted as well?
Yeah, and I don't want to make waves. And like we all grow up with a parent or a your family, and they have all got their own way of seeing things and actually thinking things, and we need to get out of that.
And so it really is just more of the question, and it's something that we all have to face. It's, what is the reason for us being uninterested
In
in
just life.
finding out about those before us, finding out about history, finding out about these sorts of things, acquiring this knowledge in order to just create some sort of understanding for yourself, just so that you can have some kind of a grasp or a deeper understanding about the world around you. Because why wouldn't you find out more about the world around you currently if you study what was around prior to you?
Yeah. And then we are told that we must have a strong foundation. How deep do you actually want to go? Here or further down? Let's go to Philippians. Is it 4:3? 4:13. It's Clement's name.
Oh, right, okay. Philippians 4 verse 3. And I entreat thee also, true yokefellow, help those women which laboured with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and with other my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life.
Now, we know Jesus discipled the 12. Yes, the one fell away. We know that. After Jesus left, who did they, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, etc., who did they teach? And it's to actually build a much firmer foundation.
It's to build a firmer foundation, not just to become an activist-y type or anything like that, but it's to build a firmer foundation of, if you as a Christian want to bolster your faith, so to speak, or want to become more convicted and more convinced about what you believe, history is there to help us follow the line from Jesus to the apostles, then to the early church fathers, i.e. the church fathers are those who adopted the doctrines of the apostles after the apostles.
Yes.
And they carried on this lineage of that which was said in the Bible. They had the mentality of, we're following on the apostles' work,
Yes.
so that there's always a thread. So that's going to help when it comes to you understanding the deeper things of Christianity, because you know that you've got a lineage that you can go back in time with
Yeah.
to show that these are the reasons I believe the things that I do, because the witnesses have been faithful throughout history to bring forth these truths without corruption or error or getting into deceit, because there's been this continual line throughout history of faithful men
who have, taught others. And they, themselves were, taught by the ones who, saw him.
And so, yeah, that is basically just a sum up of a question that all of us need to address within ourselves. And of course, acquiring knowledge is never easy, but the alternative is indifference and a general apathy that is far too prevalent in the church. And it needs to, we all need to ask it of ourselves and to find out what is the reason. Why are we so uninterested in these sorts of things?
Yeah. Go to 1 Kings 22:17. Yeah.
22:17. And he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills as sheep that have not a shepherd. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace.
So for that, we've actually been to many churches, as I'm sure we've mentioned before. And every church is exactly the same as the church before. And I personally have actually come to the point where I cannot bear going to church. Besides being boring, it's like the pastor says things that I do not see in the Bible. He reads from it, but he actually misunderstands it. And I'm not going down there again.
And I get the reluctance, because I was certainly there as well, and I suppose it is quite easy to get there again, but it's easy to get disaffected by the things of God because of the failures of man.
Yeah.
It's easy to be frustrated with God because men have
let us down. We actually shouldn't get disheartened if we reach a point where we can't see the actual reason for going to church, because God is so much bigger than church. And go home then. Go home and learn for yourself. And find out if the things you've been told are indeed true. Are they really true, or maybe there's a little sprinkle there, but really true? And it's the point that I think we both reached where we got so fed up with like verses being like bended and twisted, because of it's too easy for the pastor to actually get up and speak, and nobody there would say, hang on, I don't quite go along with unto this. And so the man feels, I'm fine, and the people there get more and more mixed up.
And despondent. And,
Yes.
And yeah, for each of us, it is coming to the realization that we ought to know what it says.
Yes, for ourselves.
We ought to know and study history. If you're a Christian, study the Bible. If you're not a Christian, study history, and you'll see that Christianity is all it's cracked up to be. And yes, as Jesus says, you will have trials and persecutions. It's to be expected.
Yeah, and particularly nowadays with this wokery going on and all these different faiths, nobody wants to go through hard times because their feelings get hurt. I can tell you now, God couldn't care two hoots about your feelings. Grow up. And yes, there have been times I've been so hurt and my feelings got hurt. Grow up.
And it's a growing up in terms of learning to care about things that are bigger than you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's tough because life is all about, especially in this world, there is this idea of self-preservation above all else. But in order to find your life, in order to save your life, you have to be willing to lay it down for something bigger than you. And that comes with, at least as a start, acquiring knowledge that goes beyond you.
Yeah, because like man generally lives until the age of 80. Okay. But 80 years in light of forever